We've been visited by a lot of young people in the audience here today, Mr. Administrator, and great to see all of them. They have probably the biggest stake in what we're talking about here today. Either are we going to have a planet, or are they going to have a planet to grow up on and grow old on? And will they have the opportunity to have good jobs to support themselves and their families as the rest of us have? So we welcome all of you. And with that in mind, now let me say to Senator Whitehouse, welcome. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, Administrator. What time frame can you commit to for the existing power plants part of the power plant rule, the existing gas-fired power plants?
Yes, we're working on that process right now, and we've engaged our stakeholders to start that formal process.
Yeah.
And so we're going to move as quickly as possible.
Can you commit to any endpoint at all?
Well, it's too early for me to just throw out a date. So what I'd like to do is be able to provide you a date that is grounded in the facts of how the process is going to be designed and going.
We have given you authority to regulate methane emissions. And we have required in the law that you use, and I'm quoting the law here, empirical data, which means that you're supposed to actually measure it, correct?
Yes.
That's what empirical means.
Yes.
Has EPA historically underestimated methane leakage from the fossil fuel sector?
Not just EPA, but I think most have underestimated methane.
But EPA for sure has.
Yes.
And EPA did so because it relied on industry reporting in order to come to its numbers, correct?
I wouldn't say solely on industry reporting, but I think that industry reporting informed our measurements, yes.
Yeah, and the result was underreporting. Now, in 2018, which is 5+ years ago, EDF first reported that EPA's methane numbers were too low. EDF reported likely methane leak numbers that were 60% higher than your GHG inventory numbers. 2 years later, Penn State reported further as the science developed and said that methane leaks were 2 times higher than EPA was relying on. Stanford last year has put out its own research showing that methane leakage is likely 3 times higher than EPA has been relying on. One of the things that we asked you to do was to acquire satellite data, and we appropriated money to do that. What is the status of EPA's acquisition of satellite data? Do you presently have access to satellite data for methane leaks?
I do know that we have started a process to acquire. We are leveraging the acquisition of satellite data from some of our sister agencies like NASA and others.
When do you think you're going to have actual access to satellite data?
I'll have to get back to you on that specific timeline, but what I can say is, and you'll see this in the actions that we've taken as we use the resources that you've given us, and we've put out this call for competitions to look at the best technologies. You'll see that satellite data is specified as something that we want to consider in our acquisition along with our federal family to be sure that we're all working with the same numbers.
At a minimum, satellite data puts up a pretty good flag for further inquiry about methane leaks that you can do through drones, aircraft, or on-ground measuring, correct?
Correct.
And are you currently deploying that satellite information to trigger those further investigative methods?
We're looking at all the options above.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a point where looking at it has to end and doing it has to begin.
I will say you've cited 2018, 2019, 2020. I think there were a number of years where the agency was prevented from pursuing the pursuit of climate change gases. And so with the resources that you all have appropriated since 2021 and under this administration, I will say that we have moved as aggressively as we possibly can, and we'll continue to do so.
And on the enforcement side, some time ago, the administration announced that it was putting together a methane task force, which as a proposition makes a lot of sense, because if you have satellite data that points at methane leaks and allows for further investigative methods to be deployed or if it's reliable enough, simply pursued on that basis. You might want to be talking to the Department of Justice about what their capabilities are with respect to enforcement. You might want to be talking to the Department of Interior about what they as landlords and permittors can do to push those leaks. What is your view right now of that methane task force, how often it meets, how often your team meet with Interior and DOJ people, whether there is an actual sort of war room type setup for the task force to be operating through in a cooperative way?
I'll say that when the president stepped out in 2021 and cited methane and the methane pledge as priorities, all of the agencies have been working to focus on this. When we look at the methane regulation, the most aggressive methane regulation this agency has ever finalized, that set the new bar for some of the ways we could enforce these actions. There is a constant conversation and relationship, very close relationship with the Department of Justice on looking at how we enforce our regulations. But with Interior, as well as DOE and others, we've all received resources from the Inflation Reduction Act. And so as we look at how we develop those grants, use the information, use the data and the technology, we're trying to be sure that we're leveraging all of our resources together in this whole of government approach. It does take coordination, but I think the development of enforcement, regulations, and these grant programs is being done in concert with not just DOJ from an enforcement standpoint, but DOE and Interior and others as well.
My time has expired.